Over the last 2 decades, a series of Supreme Court decisions have eroded civil rights protections, leaving millions of Americans vulnerable to discrimination. The court's actions have narrowed the rules for bringing civil rights cases across the board, in employment, housing, the environment, and healthcare. In a case originating in New Jersey, the Supreme Court ruled that plaintiffs must now prove not only that racial discrimination exists, but that it is intentional, a standard that is nearly impossible to meet. In a case from Alabama, the courts exempted the states from civil rights law, preventing people from suing state governments even when those governments are guilty of discrimination. In a third set of cases, the courts have ruled that federal programs like Medicaid are actually not laws but contracts, and as a result, people cannot enforce their rights to receive guaranteed services in federal court. One precedent-setting case arose in Michigan.
Sit back. When you hear this sound right here, you're going to raise your hand, okay?
In Detroit, as in cities and towns across the country, many low-income families fail to get the health care services promised by the state.
My daughter, Maisha, has a hearing problem. I first noticed the problem when she was 6 months old.
You all set, Maisha.
When she was at the age of where she's supposed to be trying to talk, she was sounding like a deaf person would talk. She's an asthmatic as well. When she has an asthma attack or have problem breathing, she didn't know how to communicate. She couldn't tell you, I'm short of breath or anything.
Ann and Maisha Rudolph are among the 1.25 million people in Michigan who are covered by Medicaid, the government-funded health insurance program for low-income people. For all kids, early diagnosis of medical problems can make a critical difference. But those on Medicaid, like Maisha, don't always get the care they need. Blake Hammond and his mother, Michelle, are in the same bind.
My son, before he got diagnosed, it should have been clear that he had autism or at least some type of severe mental disorder. He's hypersensitive to taste and smell. He's hypersensitive to hearing.
Excuse me.
He has a 4-year-old sibling, and it's hard to balance both of them.
Excuse me. You mean a 4-year-old devil?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to balance both of them. It's an ongoing process. My whole day is filled with him.
It's very hard for people who have Medicaid as their form of insurance to get the same sort of medical care that other children have. First, there are only a small number of doctors or clinics or hospitals that will serve these people.
Okay, let's finish up with the ADHD stuff.
Children on Medicaid are supposed to receive preventive health care through what's called EPSDT, or Early Periodic Screening, Diagnosis, and Treatment.
The state contracts with the HMO providers, and then it's up to the HMO providers to make sure that the EPSDT screening gets done. But they don't do that because there's nobody from the state who's really cracking down on it.
Okay, that looks good. Maisha Rudolph did not receive early screening. As a result, her asthma and hearing problems are now more severe than they might have been.
Even before she was 6 months old, she had this problem with her hearing. Okay, open your mouth. I knew she had asthma, and I told them that she did. And they said, well, how do you know? I said, I have 4 other kids that's asthmatic, so I know.
Blake Hammond also did not receive an early diagnosis, and his family didn't get the services that would have helped them cope with his autism.
The neurologist that he was seeing didn't even diagnose him with autism that he'd been seeing for a year. I ended up going through Family Neighborhood Services because I was low income, and they were the ones that said he was autistic. And lo and behold, when I take it to the neurologist, then he agrees that he's autistic, but follows no treatment plan after that.
The state has not made a commitment to these children that they're going to provide the services they said they would provide when they took the Medicaid money. And they don't seem embarrassed by it or in any way expecting chastisement for it. So I think they're ignoring their responsibility under the law. Michelle
Hammond and Ann Rudolph joined with the group Westside Mothers. The The group advocates for the rights of Medicaid recipients.
I call Westside Mother meeting to order. Chairing the meeting is Ann Rudolph. I am the chairperson.
Westside Mothers saw just one option for making the state live up to its responsibility. They filed a class action lawsuit against Michigan.
The lawsuit alleges that the federal statute, Medicaid, requires that Michigan provide certain health services to children. The lawsuit alleges that Michigan is not doing that. So as a result, the children in Michigan who are eligible for Medicaid aren't getting the health care that they should be getting under the federal law.
For years, Westside Mothers didn't get the chance to bring their lawsuit into court because the judge came up with a new and unusual theory.
What the theory was that this particular law, Medicaid, isn't really a federal law. He said it was more like a contract.
A contract solely between the state of Michigan and the federal government. Medicaid recipients are not a party to that contract. Therefore, the Westside Mothers group had no right to sue. On the basis of this theory, the judge dismissed the case. Under the ruling, in Michigan, if children on Medicaid don't receive the health services they're entitled to, they would have no legal recourse.
I think if the courts aren't available to correct things that are being done wrong to children, then we don't really have anywhere else to turn. The children don't have the option to vote, and so their only recourse for fair treatment in this country is the courts. And if that's closed off to them, they're lost.
Okay, face the door. Now bend over and touch your toes. And
If you can't sue the state, then what's going to happen to the kids? The parents should have a right to sue them. They should have a right for their voices to be heard.
Westside Mothers appealed the case and won the right to go to court. But 3 years after they first filed suit, Westside Mothers is still waiting to have their case heard. Across the country, similar tactics are being used to keep people's civil rights claims out of court.
The fact that we had to spend 3 years exploring a new theory of why poor people shouldn't get to go to federal court it's sad and it's frustrating. So you have kids who could have been getting better who are still just continuing to get sick.
They hurted my child, and in the long run, she has to suffer for it. Not the state, not the doctors. She has to suffer.